You've discovered the Techno-Progressive Hub. Join us to fight for a high-tech and radically democratic future. I'm speaking today with Thomas Baudinette. He is a senior lecturer in global cultures at Macquarie University in Australia, a cultural anthropologist whose work maps the role the popular culture plays in shaping gender and sexuality across East and Southeast Asia. His first book, Regimes of Desire, Young Gay Men, Media and Masculinity in Tokyo, examined how the commercial gay media and the bar culture of Shinjuku shapes gay male identity in Japan. His second book, Boys Love Media in Thailand, Celebrity Fans and Transnational Asian Queer Popular Culture, is the first book-length study of the Thai BL phenomenon, drawing on 6 years of ethnographic fieldwork documenting the shift of queer cultural production in Asia from Japan to Thailand, or at least all over the world now. He has also co-edited East Asian Pornographies and Online Porn Cultures and Queer Transfigurations, Boys Love Media in Asia. He's currently working on 2 new book projects, an edited collection, Writing the Thai Wind, Globalising Thai Media, Transnational Fandom and Soft Power, and a monograph titled Queer Fantasies of Asia, Japanese and Korean Media Fandom in the Philippines. And I just want to set up my own interest, Tom, and thank you for joining me.
You're welcome.
Reading your book, I was delighted to discover that in your media studies circles, ACA fans is a legitimate idea, and I am definitely an ACA fan of this topic. But just to set up my own interest briefly, I am, as a sociologist, I've been mostly a quantitative sociologist, but my undergraduate thesis was participatory ethnography of Pentecostalism. I spent 4 months in a Pentecostal church. Then I went to work in Sri Lanka and briefly ordained as a Buddhist monk there, worked in Japan, studied Buddhism in Japan, and then eventually realized I didn't have the language chops to be a Buddhist scholar. But so I went into more more English-based sociology. But during COVID, my daughter turned me on to The Untamed, which was streaming on Netflix, as many people apparently got turned on to, which is a homosocial or a homophilic bromance. The text is much more explicit than the TV show. But of course, the TV show was hugely popular. My daughter was also a fan of BTS, and it turned us on to BTS fandom. My wife and I started to read everything that MXTX, the author of the Untamed series, had written, and got deeply involved in those. Then we got deeply involved in K-dramas, and then I discovered the Thai BL and GL genres. And most recently, I will say I am a Kang Namping fan from Kemjira, the Kemjira, yes, there we go, those 2 boys, and have many other parasocial relationships now that we will talk about. But in terms of the interest for the IAT, one of the things that I've been fascinated about is the way that international, transnational identities get formed around pop culture fandom and the kind of political ramifications of that. And we saw some of that with BTS. We can get into that, how BTS fandoms have been mobilized, Taylor Swift fandoms, and et cetera. But this is an explicitly queer media and forming transnational identities around it. So that was what brought me to it, the technology, politics connection here. But let's start with the history of BL. And particularly, I lived and studied in Japan for a year and have strong ties to Japan. So I was fascinated to go back and relearn the history of shoujo manga and the origins of queer media in the 1970s. Tell us a little bit about that.
So my interest in BL as a genre indeed stems from my initial interest in queer media in Japan. So I always, as much as I'm a big kind of kind of advocate and indeed celebrate the media of Thailand and so forth. I do think it's important to historicize the emergence of this kind of popular culture form in Japan, and particularly as you rightly point out, James, the relationship between the history of BL and the broader history of women's consumer culture in Japan. So we saw we can there's various different historical entry points that we can begin discussing, but the kind of classic one that scholars in Japan and elsewhere have identified is the ways in which the popular culture produced for women, particularly young women's comics in the 70s, were kind of exploring various questions around desire and sexuality and romance, and in the patriarchal context of kind of immediate post-war Japan, where women's desires and experiences were heavily, not even just silenced, but also denied. A generation of young female authors, basically due to their interest in queer literature and queer film, both from Japan and also Western Europe, particularly France, began writing a series of kind of manga comics that were exploring the kind of doomed love affairs of young men, often in kind of boarding schools in France or Germany or something like that. So we have classic examples of Kaze to Ki no Uta, the song of the wind and the trees by Takemiya Keiko, or the Po Clan, Po no Ichizoku by Hagio Moto. So these young women manga authors were specifically using the kind of lens of male romance and sex as a kind of useful way for them to explore broader questions of gender and sexuality, creating a world that was free of the patriarchal control and particularly the patriarchal control of women's bodies. So by using male kind of romance and relationships as a site to explore these questions, it became a kind of safe space for women authors and then readers to explore that. And then from the 70s through the 80s to the 90s, we have this increasing commercialization and indeed boom of these sorts of productions in the Japanese context that moved from a very, initially it was very politicized, but then it became just a space for women to explore their pleasures, and to like romance fiction, Mills and Boon, which is all about a kind of romantic escapism, but also managing the day-to-day drudgery of being a woman in potentially a not satisfactory relationship with a kind of misogynistic partner. BL likewise kind of played that role in the Japanese context.
And from the 70s, you also had the development in parallel, but and this is an ongoing theme of Yuri.
Yes.
So we had yaoi, and which is the male version, and that was primarily heterosexual women, as you were talking, and then Yuri, which was primarily for queer women, or doomed Yuri. It was often doomed Yuri back then. The one would die or one would get married or something like that. And so these developed in parallel, but they had very different audiences.
Yeah, I mean, there are obviously relationships between the two in terms of their developmental history. But, I actually recently finished writing a piece. There's going to be an edited collection on girls love media across Asia that will be coming out sometime in the near future. And I was kind of asked as a BL scholar to kind of reflect on what BL studies can learn from GL studies. And the thrust of that argument was to kind of look back to the history of Yuri, as he was called in Japan, and indeed still is called in Japan, and to think about, the fact that sapphic content was always unabashedly tied to queer kind of consumer culture, whereas whilst BL in the Japanese context did have queer readerships, from a market perspective, it was always marketed and indeed produced for a mostly heterosexual female audience. Whereas the history of Yuri, as you quite rightly point out, has always been implicitly tied to queer women's reading cultures.
I
So
think there's
yeah,
two more terms to put on the table. Fujoshi, right, which is this
yeah.
somewhat derogatory, although reclaimed, I think, term for women who read BL, and fudanshi, or is what is fudanshi?
Yeah, Fujoshi comes from it is a slang term. It basically means a female fan of BL in the Japanese context. In kind of formal Japanese, Fujoshi, written with a particular character, refers to just a kind of typical, like means gentlewoman or something like that. But fans of BL kind of took that character Fu and replaced it with the character for. You'll often see it translated in Japan, like English, as rotten woman. But a more accurate translation, I often will say, is the Fu is the same Fu in tofu, and it literally means fermented. Or pickled rather than rotted. So they're pickled women or fermented women. So what that means is that their brains have been pickled by BL to the point where they see it everywhere and they're immersed in it. So I like to kind of make this distinction because rotten women does seem to have a kind of pejorative attached to it. The term fujoshi isn't as pejorative in the Japanese context historically or even contemporarily as people seem to think it is in the English context. And then the fudanshi concept emerged in the late 90s, early 2000s merely as a what we call a calque. So it's the male equivalent. Jo in Fujoshi means woman. Dan means man. So a Fudanshi is someone is a man who is into BL specifically. So it's not used for male fans of Yuri, and Fujoshi is also not used for female fans of Yuri. It's specifically tied to BL. The fans whose brains and their ideas have been pickled by BL.
So one of the fascinating things in your book was that students at Chulalongkorn University, in particular, I guess, started to translate bootleg copies of BL manga from Japan, and
Yeah.
then were selling them and sharing them, and started to call themselves Sawai, or Y girls. And they were, so this was the Thai fans of this Japanese genre, and then
Mm.
eventually the Japanese fans of the Thai BL that we'll talk about started to distinguish themselves as like, no, we're Y fans of what the Thais are doing, but we're not fans of what we're doing here in Japan because that's entirely different. And so
Mm.
there's this split both between the gay male culture in Japan and the yaoi fan production, and also
Mm.
the Thai media, which has become to represent something else entirely. Do I have that right?
Yes, that's correct. So, to kind of address that first kind of historical jump, I mean, so Japanese BL culture kind of spread regionally across East and Southeast Asia in the late 80s and 90s through these kind of bootleg processes or informal means of sharing. I don't like the word piracy because I think that it's a little bit
Sure.
restrictive and legalistic. But and then that kind of created fandom cultures in the context of for example Thailand of they were some of them used the term fujoshi, but the term salwai eventually crystallized initially to refer to fans of Japanese BL in Thailand, but has shifted now to refer to, not exclusively but mainly to fans of Thai BL content. And yes, in the Japanese context, some fans of Thai BL, not all, but some will call themselves like Y garu, Y girls, a kind of version of Sao Y in the Japanese context to kind of emphasize, no, I'm a fan of Thai BL, not Japanese BL. Or they'll use the more broad term Thai Numa. So the Thai Numa refers to the fandom for Thai media in Japan more broadly. So not exclusively BL, but also T-pop, Thai film, Thai food, etc. And so they'll explain themselves as Thai Numan or Shimin, so citizens of the Thai swamp, literally. And once again, that term Numa is a Japanese slang term that just refers to any kind of fandom. I should also mention that in the Thai context, we also now have the expression numwai. So num is the Thai word for man, so or boy. So why boys, sawai, numwai. And in the Thai context now, why, which is the domestic term, actually stands for both yaoi and yuri. So when I say I'm a fan of series Y in Thai, now that means both Thai
Hmm.
BL and GL. And that's a more relatively recent phenomenon. At the time I was writing my book, that wasn't the case, but now it is.
So the other strain that comes in is, which you say in your book, the Corpanese combination here
Yes.
is that the Koreans were in the 90s developing the K-pop idol system, a way of
Yeah.
training actors who could sing and dance and act, who were the whole package, and then who could be marketed for public consumption with a very strict regime of control over their social media and their public presentation. And that eventually then gets incorporated into what the Thais are going to do. So tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, basically with the emergence of the Thai BL and GL kind of systems or machine, if you will. I use the metaphor of the machine in my book. Um, is basically born from the rise and influence of Japanese and Korean media fandom in Thailand. Sorry, I almost said the Philippines because I also talk about it in that context. But in Thailand, and also the ways in which Thai producers of media, so Thai creative industries, have looked to the methods of production and promotion of both Japan, but particularly South Korea, to as models to emulate or even innovate. So in the book, I describe how the production system that underlies BL and its promotion system and its fandom culture represents a kind of merging of both Japanese and Korean media fandom and production, and then a kind of engagement with a broader local culture. So because Thailand has had its own consumer culture and media histories and so forth since the kind of post-war period. We can historicize the emergence of fandom cultures in Thailand to the 50s and 60s, etc. So it's not just a kind of I position it, it's not just like this kind of neo-colonial imperialist, like Japanese and Korean media fandom dominating Thai production, and then merely leading to kind of lazy mimicry. What we're actually seeing is a very innovative domestication, or what we call glocalization, where a global form is localized and then used to produce an innovative and distinct culture, because all cultures are hybrid, right? That then is able to be strategically built upon. And for me, Thai BL and GL is particularly exciting because it takes some of the implicit elements of the Korean wave, such as shipping culture, the practice of imagining members of idol groups like BTS or Blackpink in queer relationships. That's all very implicit in the Korean production logic. It's managed and something that the agencies and production companies kind of tacitly approve, but it's always hush hush. Whereas in
Right.
Thailand, the innovation was like, let's make this the main deal, and we will make
Right.
it explicit. It's on the page, like, and you as a fan, you're kind of led to engage with shipping, and educated how to do so at the initial period.
It's
And now
always
in yeah,
it's always
yeah,
a balance because, as you know, the Untamed, the actors in the Untamed were intensely shipped.
yes,
And the Chinese government got intensely uncomfortable with that and told them
yes,
never to
yeah,
appear on stage together again.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
so, and we're seeing, and I'll bring up later some of the similar dynamics that are happening here in the West. But the shipping, you're saying in K-pop was largely, you would have to go to like a site like AO3 and read fanfic that was
yeah.
shipping the different boys or girls together. But
Yeah.
it was not something that was explicitly acknowledged. But when it got to Thailand, it was. It
Yeah,
was
I mean,
became
I
it
mean,
became the center.
Yeah, so basically the production companies in K-pop and for example in the book I talk about how SM Entertainment and their massive boy group in the 2000s TVXQ Dongdangshinki like they were managed and promoted and like kind of shipped and in Korea the term for all of this is business gay, so business gay performance, so they perform queerness and but it's all hush, as I said, hush hush, like they'll kiss each other on stage sometimes or so like in their most dramatic version, but it was all to kind of spark engagement and it's never explicitly acknowledged. Whereas in Thailand, it's very much like here are two actors, they're very handsome. We're going to put them in a show where they're going to play two men who fall in love, and then outside of the logic of that show, you can ship them, and they're going to appear in events. They're going to like engage with each other. They know you're doing it. They're okay with you doing it, and they will do it too together with you. It's a collaborative process that is explicit and open, and it's all very, very kind of I mean, it's managed, but at the same time, it's also about acknowledging and allowing the fans to participate and indeed direct certain elements of the shipping culture, as opposed to the K-pop system where it's kind of like, yeah, we know you like to ship these two together, so let's put them in a show together where they, like I'm thinking about, for example, recently the group TXT, Tomorrow X Together, BTS's kind of uh, follow-up group by Big Hit. Like there was an episode where a popular couple in that series raised like they were taking care of a baby together. So obviously that got the shippers like, oh yeah, they're like a mum and dad taking care of their kid. But it's all hush hush. Whereas
So,
in Thailand, it's like, hey, look, Peng and Numpin have kids. Woo!
So,
Yeah,
so part of the thing that I like what you do with this topic is your adamant and passionate defense of what they're about. And
yeah,
Western audiences often, especially queer audiences, often react against this media about and have the concern about gay baiting, that
yeah.
sometimes these actors or actresses are actually straight, and that they're certainly often not actually involved with each other out off the stage. And I like the way that you defend it. So go ahead to put that to rest. It's not gay baiting.
Yeah. So I always my response to like gay baiting or queer baiting are the terms that often get thrown around. This was a term that emerged in Western media theory at the kind of during the what the, like the Will and Grace queer as folk moment in kind of the media market. So early 2000s where we saw extreme kind of advances in the legal kind of protections facing LGBTQ folk in the US and kind of turn towards them in media marketing and so forth in the United States. So the production of content specifically for them and a signaling towards a recognition of the importance of that marketplace. So queer baiting as a media theory is designed to explain media that promises queer content and then fails to deliver. That's queer baiting. Like pure and simple, that's the definition. That is all it can ever possibly mean. Um, Type EL, by definition, is not queer baiting because it isn't promising queer content and then not delivering it. Now, there's questions around whether bromance as a genre, for example, in the Chinese context or even in the Thai context, is queer baiting. That's a different conversation because I'll talk about BL and GL. Like it doesn't matter what the personal desires or identities of the actors are for a question of like whether some a media market is queer baiting or not. Yes, we can have productive conversations about whether it is problematic to capitalize on LGBTQ plus audience's desire for representation and make money from it. That's not a debate about queer baiting. We call that pinkwashing. There's a robust literature around it. In my book, I even tackle that and raise my own concerns. And as I do more work on the globalization of Thai BL and its increasing kind of entanglement with the global kind of soft power strategies of the Thai state, I'm well aware of some of these issues. But queer baiting is not a useful theoretical framework to make sense of shipping culture because it's a misapplication and a misunderstanding of what the theory is designed to do. I also am concerned about authenticity politics in the sense that first and foremost, Thailand is still not a media market, despite the emergence of BL and GL and so forth, where every single actor is safe to come out. And also, we shouldn't be demanding that people come out because that's a very personal journey. So whether or not these are real or performed relationships, I think that if we focus too much on the authenticity of the kind of nature of these relationships without thinking about the social context and the cultural context of Thailand, we then kind of are unable to recognize the good work that Thai BL and GL is doing and shipping culture is doing in terms of representation, in terms of providing support to marginalized communities around the world. It basically is, I whenever I talk about this in terms of my teaching or whenever I'm kind of delivering lectures or indeed what we're doing today, I always kind of say it's not a productive question because it shuts down and doesn't allow us to recognize the good. And it's almost like there's this always already skepticism around, well, if something makes money, it must always be bad. And I get where that comes from in terms of social theory being heavily influenced by, the works of our good friend Karl Marx, but and of course the Frankfurt School and so forth. But I think that when we work with Asian media, we need to be sensitive to the cultural context and be willing to critique the Western theoretical models that we typically use to make sense of this media.
And what I try to explain to people that there's no good accounting of how much televisual queer media there is in the world, but there's like 100 productions a year of BL
Yeah,
and probably 24 GL productions, so much that you
yeah,
can't possibly keep up as a fan. And so it's,
yeah,
it's getting into all kinds of different
yeah,
subgenres now.
yeah,
Gangster dramas and science fiction and romantasy and so forth.
yeah,
Another accusation, let's put this one to rest. The semi-uke structure, the top bottom or dominant passive structure of a lot of the relationships, and it's formalized in terms of whose name comes first in the ship name, right? So you have King Nam Ping and not Nam Ping Kang, and the
yeah,
fans will tease them and say, Nam Ping Kang, and they'll say, no, 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 or
yeah,
sometimes
yeah,
they'll play with it and say, okay, maybe sometimes.
yeah.
But so how important is that kind of and Western audiences would accuse this of being heteronormativity because of the role of gendered norms here. So where do you fall out on that?
So I think once again, questions of representation are important. And indeed, these debates do happen in Thailand as well. However, the Seme-uke rule is complicated because it's not just about the characterization or the kind of physicality of the models or something, like the seme, the top is the more, traditionally masculine and the uke is the more traditionally feminine. It's also about narrative. So who drives the narrative, whose perspectives are centralized within the narrative. So a traditional Japanese BL and indeed Thai BL follows the traditional Japanese model. We call it the noble path of BL, the BL no Odo in Japanese. Basically is that the seme is the person whose desires become uncontrollable and they basically become attached to and romantically involved with an uke who they basically then kind of allow to enter into a relationship. They lead the relationship So the seme uke rule is not just about characterization; it also plays a narrative function, and it is, yes, historically tied to a particular understanding of what gender and sexuality should and is, that is born out of 20th century Japan. But we need a structure such as the Semeuke rule in any kind of media so it can be subverted. So what we do see now is that Japanese and indeed Thai BL and GL has the same sorts of dynamics to a lesser extent, play with these structures. So, for example, when fans playfully tease King Numping is the example you use and say, "Oh, Numping, maybe you'll be the seme this time." Ha 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 ha. It's just part of that playful fan culture, and that is something that I think is important. I also get very frustrated with some fandom discourse in the West in particular. You know, they critique the Seme Uke kind of dynamic, and then also will say, but why doesn't Thai BL have a space for like femme and more effeminate kind of queer men or trans, etc. And then when a company such as Dumundi, which is where Keng Numping are based, then provide like a model where there are femme presenting characters, and yes, they're mostly uke, though not exclusively, and then you get Westerners saying, "Oh, you're being heteronormative." It's kind of like, well, you know, you're moving the gateposts
Yeah.
of like you can't. My ultimate response to this is there is no such thing as perfect representation. And to demand perfect representation is not a useful activity. It's the same issue that I have with authenticity politics. So why not recognize that these are just models that need to be there for BL to work? Some shows are classic and follow the generic conventions very closely. Others play with them.
So
And indeed,
Nunu in particular has gotten a lot of crap for being feminized, right?
yeah. And it's like, well, and to which my response is like, how do you know fans who don't have any active relationship with this individual that this is not their authentic life? Right?
Right.
You don't. So stop worrying about it, and stop policing them. It's not productive behavior. It's toxic kind of antisocial fandom, and it
Hmm.
all is born out of these. There's been a bit of a conservative swing in Western fandom in particular, with the rise of authenticity politics and purity politics, and this has been damaging to queer representation, not celebratory. So yeah,
You mentioned trans
yeah.
representation, and let's go there for a second because I think a lot of Western queer audiences or queer aware audiences would know that Thailand has a third gender, the katoi,
Yeah,
and perhaps not be aware that there's also the category of tom
yeah,
for women, and
yeah,
so there is a dearth of representation in this in the televisual media, at least that we're
yeah,
talking about for these
yeah.
two kinds of categories.
Yeah, and I would say, like, thank you for. I mean, I was hoping to segue into discussing some of this as well, because Thailand has a very different conceptualization of sex and gender to the kind of dualistic approach that emerges out of like Western Enlightenment thinking that we kind of privilege as natural and logical in Western debates, in the sense that in Thailand. There is a system known as paired. So paired is a term that can loosely be translated as either sex or gender. And here we have that difficulty already. Like it doesn't kind of neatly match into these categories. And hence seme and uke, it's a more expansive model of what sex and gender can look like beyond a simple male-female dyad, though that is implicit within PET as well for various different historical reasons, partly born from Thailand's engagement with the West. in the 19th century. But seme and uke as concepts can be just mapped onto, they're just a new paired category within this huge multivariate notion of what gender can look like. And indeed, we're seeing nowadays that in Thai queer male spaces, so let's just use gay male culture as a slang term to make it simple. But in queer male cultures, we're now beginning to see Thai gay men use the term seme and uke to describe like whether they're top or bottom.
Hmm.
And like so that's just and there's a recognition in Thailand that sex and gender is always contextual and relational to the context within which it is professed. And hence, pet can be something in one context and something in another context. And then you're quite right. There are categories such as tom and gratoi, which are kind of frustrate the gender dyad that we have in the West, and hence in the West we often call them third genders. But in the Thai context, that doesn't make sense because there's more than even two or three. There's multivariate and unending. So to then impose Western gender sexuality logics onto Thai media is once again one of these good examples of misapplication of knowledge and hence
Edek, not emic.
yes,
Or
exactly
emic,
right.
not
Yes.
edek, right?
Yes, insider versus outsider views for the non-sociologists, anthropologists in the room.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Um, Another dimension that's fascinating me on the GL side, and I wonder if this is also happening on the BL side, is Phi Malasorn had this fight with her company North Star. She went independent. Idol Factory shut down, and Free and Becky went independent
Yeah.
as independent companies. Faye May
Yeah.
went independent as a Kujin couple.
Yeah.
The actress, the straight actress, Mai, started
Mhm.
Mind Media to do GL production separate from the other
Mhm.
production companies. And Englot have this ongoing war with Nawat at their company. And it just seems like
Mhm.
all the GL women are involved in one extent or another in struggles for representation within their companies and are
Mhm.
seeking sometimes now independent financial models to pursue their careers. Is there a similar kind of dynamic with the BLs, or are the BLs favored by these companies and therefore don't have the same struggle?
I mean, we have seen famous BL Kujin go independent, either after some of their companies closed down, most famously Bilgin and PP, setting up Bilgin Entertainment and PP Entertainment after the collapse of Nadao Bangkok. Well, collapse is not the right word. After Nadao Bangkok was rolled back into its original owners, which was always Grammy. GMM Grammy, by the way. So but and then we also had Yin War, Dao Off Road, who are very successful now, setting up open label. Um, Going independent is a very common practice within the Thai media industry more broadly, and that's because the Thai media industry, in terms of its kind of legal frameworks and histories and logics, is that it's actually more similar to the Hollywood system than the idol system of Japan and South Korea. So talents are free agents who contract with production companies through agencies rather than working specifically and then managed through. Though, of course, GMMTV, Dumundi, etc., are now kind of taking the Japanese South Korean model and applying it to the Thai context.
Dumundi
Nessa,
has its own
yeah.
dating show to kind of foreground
Yes,
the
yeah,
couples and
yeah,
introduce
exactly
them. So
right.
yeah,
Yeah.
and Kang
Um,
Nam Bing actually met on one of these dating shows.
They did indeed. What I was going to say is that one thing that women in the Thai entertainment industry, whether or not they're working in GL or not, have to manage is that Thailand is very, very, very misogynistic,
Hmm.
and women do not have a lot of power or agency, and often get treated very, very poorly by the traditional production companies and logic. So one of the reasons that there was a delay in the development of GL versus BL in the Thai context was because of the fact that GL was double threatening in the sense that it was both queer and feminist, whereas BL at least was just queer, but it was still it's still men and men control things, right? So a lot of women who are seeking to engage with the BL industry, the GL industry in Thailand, they're having to go independent because of these structures. So it adds an extra layer of complexity for women who are seeking to kind of promote themselves or engage with GL. That being said, it's important to recognize and indeed celebrate the fact that both BL and GL in Thailand are mainstream genres. And I think that this is important because there is a perception among certain Western fans that there is a stigma attached to appearing in these shows and that it's not considered to be as kind of legitimate or viable as a career option. And hence everyone in BL and GL wants to get out and do real, quote unquote, heterosexual shows. That's not the case. That may have been true back in 2018. It's certainly not true in 2026. But independence, I think that we are seeing young people in Thailand who are getting involved in the creative industries. They want independence, and they're not satisfied with some of the term in Thai is konyai, so the big people who run the traditional models. I call them the dinosaurs, and hence going independent and then mobilizing and using their fan bases to kind of advocate their own contracts is actually an empowering thing. That is it's a positive thing actually, because if you think about in other Asian media markets, particularly in East Asia, so Japan, China, South Korea, where contracts and studio control is really, really strong. It's a lot like classic Hollywood, right? Where you've got like I was actually rewatching Sunset Boulevard because I'm a bit of a loser in that regard. And I was just kind of, where you've got someone like Gloria Swanson, like controlled by Paramount and etc. So Thailand isn't that bad. Though GMMTV and Dumundi and a few others are potentially 1HD. They're moving in the East Asian direction for better or worse.
I love your discussion in your book about the concept of Finn or the experience of Finn and your reflection on your own experience of Finn. And I have to say, being now a passionate follower of these various actors on social media, I, experience what you're talking about. It's like I see them interacting, and then I have to remind myself, don't be Delulu. These are just actors, right? But you get
Or
that
be
experience.
Delulu and enjoy it.
Or be Delulu. Yes, go ahead. So tell us about Finn.
Within fandom studies, we talk like when people ask what is the difference between fandom and other forms of kind of consumption. The arguments we tend to make is that fandom is transformative, so it's about it is about fundamentally you change and you change the world, and it's fundamentally effective in ways that other forms of consumption aren't. So affect in the sense of that kind of spontaneous response to something, the capacity to be moved by something, if I want to channel my Masumi and my Spinoza and my Deleuze. But basically, Fin, as a slang term in Thailand, it historically comes from gay male slang. Traditionally, it was a term to refer to finishing the sex act, i.e., coming. So it's a term that refers to orgasm. So when someone in Thailand says fin, what they mean is that they're satisfied to the same level as orgasm. And then Korean media fans in the 2000s began using this term to refer to that visceral response of satisfaction and excitement that they would get to those implicit moments of shipping that I mentioned. So GMMTV and a variety of other production companies in Thailand are basically like, how can we produce this rather than having it implicit? How can we produce it explicitly and then monetize it, to be blunt? So BL as a production logic and as a system, and GL2, the whole shipping culture is designed around inducing this moment of intense or pre-conscious, to be once again following Masumi, response to a moment of homoerotic intensity that then moves you to engage more, to participate in fandom practices, and to spend money ultimately. But at the same time, whilst it has a kind of economic profit motive on the behalf of the companies, it also, for the fans, has an empowering kind of potential. It is meaningful. That's what I mean when I say fandom is transformative. For a heterosexual woman, it allows them to explore and experience their desires in a misogynistic, heteropatriarchal society. For a queer fan, whether they be in Thailand or elsewhere, it allows them to viscerally and indeed enjoyably and publicly experience and celebrate their queer desires in ways that can be hopeful and positive, and once again manage what it means to live in a homophobic society. So Finn, whilst it's just like a slang term that means to come, to be blunt, has, as a socio-political force, a lot of power. And this is why I will always advocate that BL is a political, and GL is a political genre, even if it isn't necessarily fully activist, though at the same time, yes, it is activist. I have demonstrated in more recent scholarship.
I'll just say that your term "sana all" from the Tagalog or Taglish,
Yes,
um,
yeah,
I,
yeah,
I asked our Filipino caregiver for my mother-in-law if she was
yeah.
familiar with this term, and she said, "Yes, it means I want what you got."
Yes, yeah, 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 yeah. Exactly right. Yeah, yeah,
And it's something that they yell when they're experiencing Finn. They say, "Sana all, I want what
yeah,
you
yeah,
got."
yeah, 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 yeah. So that's
But
from the book where I talk about Filipino fandom for those listening in. Yeah.
yeah. Because I've been paying a lot of attention also to the GL space, and perhaps
Mhm.
it's not as true on the BL space, but there's a lot of harassment of actors by fans, different kinds of
Yeah,
fans. In China, they have the Seisong, which is a former stalker who follows people around, follows actresses around when they appear in fan meets and so forth. There are stalkers on the internet who will follow actors daily lives and micromanage and
yeah,
microanalyze every interaction and try to figure out if they're actually seeing somebody else and harass that person.
yeah.
And I think you're defensive of the overall positive nature of fandom despite these side effects. And as you point out, the
Mhm.
Hollywood studio system, if we go back to Hollywood, Hollywood has always had stalkers. Hollywood has always had crazy fans. So in every acting society, every society with acting, I'm sure that there's been this kind of phenomenon. But
Mhm.
it does seem that it becomes intensified by the parasociality of this business model. What do you say?
Mhm. So I think that, I mean, you're quite right that antisocial fandom is has always been inherent. Like that potential has always been there with fandom, because if fandom is about intense emotional attachment, there's always the potential for that intense emotional attachment to express itself in ways that are not socially sanctioned. Speaking anthropologist to sociologist, I mean, antisocial behavior is just
Yeah.
a natural part of life, right? What I think is it is certainly true that the business models that structure um, the production of BL and GL, and the ways in which it seeks to manage and in kind of encourage particular ways of engagement does unfortunately lead to that slippery slope where if someone basically, I've mentioned a number of times now that there are kind of implicit rules, or sometimes explicit rules, around what it means to ship in the Thai GL and BL context, and one of those rules is that you're supposed to recognize that it's ultimately performative and fantastic, and that if you slip into the belief that it is somehow real, then you are breaking a kind of covenant that has been set between the production company, the star, and the fandom. And then yes, there are certain fandom cultures, though I won't name any in order to keep myself safe, that have a more proprietary attitude to stars than others, and hence there's a belief that they have more right to control, particularly due to their financial investment, which is extraordinarily problematic.
Hmm.
What I think I would also add here, James, and partly in the spirit of the IEET, is that the implicit linkage of all of this to social media, which is a kind of social structure within which emotionality is driven through algorithms and also monetized for various different reasons, has also kind of accelerated, I think, some of this
Yeah.
harmful
You add social
antisocial
media
behavior.
addiction on top of all of these dynamics.
Exactly right. So I think what I would say though is that the kind of ethnographic work that I do is that if you pay attention to most of this kind of debate occurs online, and because of the nature of online debate, with all of that emotionality and the ways in which things that are controversial or highly emotional tend to attract more attention than others, you often get this kind of platforming and kind of more fringe perspectives. So antisocial behavior is there, but the vast majority of fans follow that contract, follow the rules, and indeed will sanction fans who behave inappropriately. And indeed, the companies also sanction them, though not necessarily as adequately as they could because they're worried about, alienating particular markets. Um, but I think
But
that,
Thailand recently
yeah.
adopted some anti-harassment laws, I
Yes.
guess, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was going to say that's partly in response to some of this. And
Mhm.
those laws are extraterritorial, so they can be applied to non-Thai citizens. And that's become really important, mostly in civil contexts. But now both stars, their managers, and their production companies have more power under Thai civil law to bring suit against antisocial fan behaviors. And we've seen some really prominent examples of this with GMMTV, with Dumundi in the last month or so, where fans who have been engaging in highly, highly, highly inappropriate behavior have been sanctioned through
Mhm.
usually the threat of legal responsibility. They often don't take it to court, they manage it before it goes there. Um, I would also
Yeah.
say one of the things that I appreciate about the Thai media system is that the idols themselves will speak up.
Mhm.
And they do so in ways that is very careful and diplomatic, but they'll basically say, if you are my lovely fan, you will do this. If you aren't my lovely fan, this is the way you'll behave. And then there are
One of
some
the things that
people.
endeared me to Nam Ping was that although he is called the governor's wife because of his his being a beside king, he is a very forceful advocate. He's a former
Oh
journalism
yeah,
student at Chulalongkorn,
yeah,
I think. Like he could be a parliamentarian.
yeah. I'm just waiting for some GL or BL actor to get elected eventually. I think it'll happen.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
And in the West, I don't know if you've been following this, but the Western acting community has been getting a crash course in some of these dynamics because of the breakout success of Heated Rivalry,
Yeah,
and the very intense shipping of those two actors, which they
yeah.
just feed into as well. They just both appeared at the Met Gala.
Met
Um,
Gala, yeah.
yeah, but also even the actors on The Pit, which is a TV medical drama that
Yeah,
it was here in the West, they got intensely, all of them got intensely shipped, but Noah Wiley in
yeah,
particular got shipped with one of the
yeah,
other male actors. And they
yeah.
mostly handled it with good humor, but then there's all this discourse about why are fans so crazy? Why do they keep doing this? So we're getting the crash course here.
I mean, I did speak to a few different media outlets during the whole heated rivalry explosion, but my main point was always just kind of like, hey, Thailand did it first. And
Exactly.
I appreciated recently. Pon Puin of GMMTV were on what's it like some podcast, Zach someone podcast, and Puin said Thailand, like in order for heated rivalry to run, Thailand basically allowed that to happen. And I'm like, yes, Puin, go for it, woo. But yes, I think that it's been interesting, and I think that there's actually a lot that the Western media markets can learn from the ways that Thailand manages things, and indeed East Asian markets. So South Korea could learn a little bit too, in the sense that giving idols the agency to kind of speak back might be
Hmm.
useful. Um, but I mean, it's all very complicated, of course. But
Well,
yeah,
no,
yeah,
one of the other things about heated rivalry is that there was a discourse around it that it was the healing of the split between the Fujoshi, or the female audience, the heterosexual female audience for gay content, and the gay male
mm,
audiences, because it was a gay male producer who filmed it, but he took
yeah,
one of the dramas from the literature of bisexual women, I guess,
yeah,
but
yeah.
she was writing for that audience. And you have pointed out that that's also a healed split, more or less, in the Thai context. That
Yes,
there are
yeah.
a lot of queer producers in the Thai context.
Yeah, and I would say that I mean I personally haven't seen that discourse of heated rivalry healing things, because I guess I only saw all the negative vitriol once again, because that's what social media likes to big up, not the happy stories, but the
Mhm.
negative ones. Indeed, doesn't all news media do that? But yeah, I mean, I've always been on record as kind of emphasizing the ways in which, like, with women and queer men being marginalized and communities who face a lot of discrimination, different kinds of discrimination. The BL and GL and all of these queer media forms are spaces of mutual exchange rather than spaces of combat. But with the rise of purity culture, authenticity politics, etc., unfortunately, that potential is being frustrated, I feel, in Anglophone contexts where it is happening. In Thailand, yeah, they're absolutely coming together. And it's been celebratory, and it's not at all considered abnormal for men to show up to Thai BL fan events, and to kind of get involved in the fanboying and fangirling, and get, it's just not weird at all.
And
They may still be a minority, but they're a welcome one.
my impression is that in Thailand, it's broken out of both of those communities and become a more popular genre. I recently learned
Absolutely.
the term to derm gay, to top up your
Yes.
gay, which
Yeah, yeah.
apparently straight people say as well. And it's like I have to go
Yeah.
home and watch a BL or GL drama just to top up my gay and get a little bit more gay in my life.
It's also like it's just basically like there's a kind of like, well, this stuff is better than the trashy soap operas that everyone else is producing. Like, and now that all of the mainstream channels are producing BL content and GL content, like this year, Channel 7 was the most conservative channel in Thailand. They finally committed to making BL and GL, and like that was the last holdout, right? So I mean, it's led to some controversies, in the sense that now we're getting some legitimate queer baiting allegations towards, like, heteronormative lacorn that are including kind of stuff designed for shipping, and then hence you get kind of commentators in Thailand saying, well, in the context where BL and GL is normal, why are you doing this? And that's, I think, once again, a legitimate debate, because that's legitimate queer debating, right?
Hmm.
And even if with companies like GMMTV, I personally love them to death. Sky Nanny, right? But like the why are they bromance and not BL is a thing. But at the same time, should we not be respecting the personal choices of stars who don't want to do that?
Hmm.
and so they're willing to it's complicated.
Well,
Um,
this is a good segue to your consulting work for the Thai government or your opinions in general about this,
yeah.
because you have very forceful thoughts about what soft power actually is and how Thailand can actually build soft power and how they're not quite doing it as effectively as they could, and the role of Thailand as a kind of imagined queer utopia within Asia now,
Mhm.
by Filipinos or Japanese or Koreans who look to Thailand and
Mhm.
think that because of these dramas, that it's something that it really isn't.
Yeah, so I mean, on the one hand, of course, as I kind of signaled earlier, yeah, I'm concerned about what happens when the Thai state intervenes in and gets involved in the production of queer popular culture, predominantly for the purposes of making money, because that's like the soft power strategies that the previous Shinawat regime was kind of promoting in 2024, 2025 were basically about like they wanted foreign direct investment, particularly from particular markets. And that's not what soft power is. Soft power is the politics of attraction, right? Not nation branding and getting money from investors. The current government, even though it's a conservative government, is actually much better at understanding what cultural diplomacy is and actually trying to invest into and support the idea that Thailand is desirable, its lifestyle is desirable, and actually trying to help companies engage in globalization in productive ways. But the catch is that their belief is that they should be using BL as a vehicle to teach people about, traditional Thai culture and like Buddhism and the monarchy and blah, 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 as opposed to recognizing that Thai BL is representative of a new cosmopolitan vision of a kind of democratic Thai society that is tied to the celebration of human rights, which is what individuals around the world, whether they be in East or Southeast Asia, Latin America, even Western Europe and North America, like are looking to Thailand. Like there is like this kind of desire for Thailanders, even if it is fictive or imaginary, as a space of kind of queer celebration. Um, and my belief is that this is what soft power strategies should be increasingly emphasizing, whilst also being careful not to delve too much into a homo nationalist logic of kind of pink washed nonsense. Um, so I am I can't talk about the specifics of some of my consultancy work, as you can imagine. I have lots of
Sure.
contractual obligations, but broadly speaking, this is the kind of track that I'm then like kind of leading, and I would say that it's receiving, like people are listening and kind of like, yeah, you're right, like that's true, or at least can we do both? I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? I'm always my main claim when I'm talking about Thai media globalization, and this isn't just BL, but also T-pop and other things, Thai horror films and art house cinema or what have you. You know, we need to move away from the what I call the elephant and coconuts vision of Thailand. And recognize that it's a kind of sophisticated, globalized cosmopolitan state with a robust and interesting media landscape and consumer culture that is attractive to various different consumer groups around the world. Let's stop getting Lisa from Blackpink appearing in like traditional Thai dress and like doing some really stereotypically kind of Thai stuff and actually have some images of youth culture in Bangkok and show how vibrant and successful it is. That's what South Korea does.
Hmm.
And it will work for Thailand too. But yeah, it's been messy. Whether or not Thailand is a queer utopia. From my perspective, it's less important about once again about the authenticity of that statement than it is about the ways in which international kind of consumers of Thai BL and GL use that fantasy in their everyday life. I'm a big believer in the power of fantasy to kind of ameliorate discriminatory social conditions in the everyday. And I think that that's something that should be celebrated. And whilst that may not necessarily address structural disadvantage, such as legal discrimination or what have you, at least that it allows people to breathe. And I think that that breathing room and that power of fantasy to empower people to seek a better life is just as important as a kind of traditional activist intervening in some kind of legalistic debate, or some kind of disruptive political action.
I'm going to link to your talk for the Chulalongkorn audience recently about the marriage equality movement
Mm,
in Thailand, and Thailand became one of the two Asian countries so far that have adopted marriage equality, the other being
great, great,
Taiwan.
great.
And you highlighted the fact, and I think you're very careful about how you said this, that you didn't want to draw a causal connection here, but that the BL and GL media industry were have fans who were intensely passionate about these things and demanded some of these storylines. And I was struck by the movie Paradise of Thorns with Jeff
Mm,
Satur and King and Engfa. Waraha,
mhm,
and she is a very prominent out lesbian, and
mhm.
the it seemed like it was a very political film because it was about the death of a gay one member of a gay couple, and the other one is not able to inherit, and it would seem like an explicit an appeal for marriage equality in Thailand. And you had pointed out that other
Mhm,
BL dramas had done that as well. So it
mhm.
does seem like there is a political dimension, and politics in Thailand are pretty complicated, and I don't want to get you into trouble, but the Move
Yeah,
Forward Party is a youth-oriented party that was basically told that even though they got more than a third of the vote, they weren't allowed to participate in government for reasons we won't go
various
into.
different reasons.
But
Yeah.
but it seems like there's a very fraught political situation still in Thailand, and that it is very fascinating to me that the how politicized this media landscape has become.
Yeah, without getting either you or me in trouble with various different legal kind of issues in the Thai context, it is fair to say that yeah, the Thai political situation is complicated, and Thailand doesn't necessarily rank particularly well on international indices of democracy, for instance. That's as close as I'm going to get to being critical here. Um, but yes, what is I think really interesting is that young people in 2020 through to 2022 were heavily invested into political activism around human rights, and addressing various different questions, including LGBTQ plus rights. And this kind of intersected with long decades running kind of activism around marriage equality, some of which was driven by political parties, some of which was driven by civil society. And we saw in the period leading up to the eventual legalization of marriage equality, or same-sex marriage, if you want to use that term, in Thailand in 2025, Thai BL and GL series were engaging in that debate. Why? Because the fans who developed a political consciousness around these issues and who were basically demanding that Thai production companies perform good politics. So unlike in Japan, South Korea, and certainly in China, where GL and BL or BL queer adjacent programs basically sidestep political questions, due to mostly, and I'll be blunt, fan apathy. Thai media invested into it, and also it's important to remember that behind the camera we also have queer directors, queer producers, members of the production and team and management team are all members of the LGBTQ plus community in various ways, shapes, or form. Several of the actors are members of the LGBTQ plus community, whether they are publicly out or not. So there was like a kind of critical mass that's like, yes, okay, these shows need to engage with these debates because our fans want that to happen. Our actors, some of whom are very, very active in these debates. In an article that I had published last year in Celebrity Studies, a journal focused on celebrity, I explore the political activism of two prominent Kujin, one from Dumundi, so that's Zee New, and one from GMMTV, that's Earth Mix. And I raised the fact that in their private capacity as citizens, they were heavily active in debates over LGBTQ plus rights and democratization. And then in the context of the shows that they were performing in, they were also engaging in kind of very, very explicit calls for marriage equality. Cutie Pie, the series, which Zee New starred in, was specifically about marriage, and the series had very interesting moments where you had these homoerotic performances that are designed to induce that moment of fin, but then rather than making people engage in spending money, it was about using fin to get fans to become politically aware. There's this wonderful scene where Zee New are in the bath after having done the deed, and they're debating about why marriage equality is important for the purposes of the kind of having the same legal rights and representations as married couples, which is indeed exactly what is dramatized in the Paradise of Thorns. So it's really it's a highly politicized form of BL and GL, more so than any other BL and GL media. Though I would always caveat that there are implicit politics in all BL and GL media, regardless of where it's produced.
Well, the royal family seems to be in almost every GL I've seen in one way or another.
No
There's
comments.
Yeah, exactly. um, you're writing something about AI ethics in fandom spaces. What are you thinking about that?
So yeah, I am beginning to think about so I cannot like basically I've noticed debates around AI amongst fans in both the work I do around K-pop fandom and also Thai BLGL fandom. I was quite concerned, as indeed were producers and managers in Thailand, around a tendency that they were beginning to see where fans were using AI tools to produce shipping content. So rather than like an illustrated fan drawn image, like they were creating like photo manipulations where you'd have like BL couples in kind of romantic engagements. And I had previously, and indeed, actually, this is a soon to be published paper that I finished revising yesterday. I would have a paper looking at the ethics of shipping in K-pop more broadly, where I was also talking about the production of deep fakes and porn manipulation and so forth within by certain shippers and trying to understand the ethical kind of space, the ethical considerations when we think about the production of that sort of fan art. So this work that I'm currently thinking around AI is kind of expanding upon that and thinking about, okay, so within a context where someone can use AI now to produce highly explicit content, how does that add extra dimensions? And then also then thinking about the broader kind of ethical debates about AI from the perspective of environmentalism and creativity and authorship and so forth. So it all is something. It's a very new something. Like so, I'm not like I don't have any concrete really answers yet. But I guess one of the things that I always say about the work that I do on fandom ethics is that I'm not necessarily interested in creating some kind of formal ethical schema or taking some kind of transcendental notion of this is what ethics are and then applying it to the context. I'm more interested in seeing the ways in which communities produce their own effective ethics, so their own ethics through effective reflection. So if fandom is transformative and produces all of these potential really highly positive kind of experiences for fans, then how does an individual themselves ethically reflect on what they do, and what are the limits that they produce for themselves, and then what happens when people engage in debate about that, and then what sorts of ethical systems emerge kind of organically through fandom communities. Though when I say organically, always recognizing the importance of legal frameworks, and also, if we're talking about social media, which I am in this context, also the algorithmic and the platform affordances. So I don't know if that's a useful answer. It's very new. I've only started thinking about it over the last month or so, maybe 2
I'm
months
looking
or so.
forward to it. It seems very appropriate and important. I mean, it just reminds me of the huge controversy that erupted around the actors in The Untamed because fans got
Yeah,
offended by
yeah,
pornographic shipping stories that were published on a
yeah,
platform, and then they got that platform shut down, and it led to an intense internet war. Gamers in China got involved; all kinds of people got involved in this
yeah,
war, and it led the government to really shut down the Danmei boys love industry
yeah, yeah.
in China. And now they're opening back up. I'm sure you saw Revenge Love and ABO Desire. Some of these other boys love media in China
Yeah,
are
well,
prying the door
produced
back
outside
open.
of China. Produced outside of China, importantly. I'm not an expert of the Chinese context, and I
Yeah.
always am very clear to emphasize that I'm not as heavily invested in what's going on in Danmei and Chinese context, though I have good friends who are. I think that the kind of particular socio-political and legal frameworks of the People's Republic of China add another layer of complexity to everything we've been talking about today. That whilst I'm not necessarily kind of investigating it, there are certain scholars who are. I will name check and signal boost one particular colleague of mine, Liang Ge, who is a lecturer of sociology at Manchester University, has two forthcoming books on Danmei that are going to be really exciting. Their work is, I think, really going to be very important for anyone who is interested in some of what we've been talking about in the context of Danmei and the PRC.
I really want to
So yeah,
appreciate to thank you for coming on today. I've been speaking with Thomas Baudinette from Macquarie University, and I'll have links in the show notes to his academic work, his books, and also a recent talk that he gave, Marriage Equality, Thai BL Culture, and Queer Soft Power, which really goes into some of the political dynamics that we talked about towards the end. Thank you so much for joining us, Tom.
thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
The Techno Progressive Hub is sponsored by the Institute for Ethics and Emerging Technologies and hosted by me, Jay Hughes. Find us at Substack at Techno Progressives.